Today's daf yomi to be for Yeshua, for Am Yisrael, for Hatzalah, for the Shmuyim, and I'm on my flight to Israel, so excuse the background noise. So we're going to start today's. This is actually the daf yomi for Monday. Is Samach Zayin of Bava Kamma, and daf yomi we're going to start on 67a, 5 lines from the top. The Gemara has said. We'd ended off our discussion from yesterday's daf that if Shinoi Hashem, that if it changed its name, it wasn't necessarily an indication that the thief had acquired it. The thief acquired it if it was a Shinoi Hashem or change of the name, or it did not return to its original status, but where it could not be returned. But if it could be returned, then the Shinoi Hashem, the change of the name, does not acquire it. So the Gemara asked the question. If it's a Shinoi Hashem, if it changes its name, but it cannot go back to its original status, is that really considered a change, and therefore does the thief really acquire it? What about the case of a pipe? And we'll see what Rashi says we're talking about here. That at first this pipe starts out as a block of wood. It's called a katsitzta. Before you hollow it out, it's called a katsitzta. The hashta tzinura, and then afterwards, at the start, it's called a block of wood, and then it becomes a pipe. So therefore, it has a total change in its name. It starts off as a block of wood, and it becomes a pipe. Vitanya, we learned in the Brisa, tzinor, let's say you have a pipe, shechakaku, that they hollowed out, the sof kavu, and in the end, they fixed it to the ground, poso as a mikvah. That can disqualify a mikvah. Why is this disqualifying the mikvah? If you're joining us a little late, that's my fault, because I don't know the schedule until I get through security. I'm in the terminal at Newark Airport going on our way to El Al. Hashem should give us strength and travel should go well. But the point is that we're 8 lines from the top, and the Gemara is continuing its discussion that we said, Shinoi Hashem. That we had just said that if it changes its name and it can't go back to its original status, that's considered an acquisition. The Gemara is challenging this from a brisa having to do with the mikvah. We know that the lacha of a mikvah is that a mikvah is disqualified if the rainwater is going to be collected through a utensil, and that's what brings it into the mikvah by having drawn through a utensil. And so here we're talking about a case where if you have a pipe, a block of wood, that you hollowed it out, and then you affixed it to the ground, that disqualifies the mikvah. If the water goes through that, or the river water goes through the mikvah, it's going to disqualify it as drawn water because it's through a utensil. But kavu ubesov chafiku. But if you attach it to the ground first, and then only afterwards did you hollow it out, anal poso that's a mikvah. Then it will not disqualify the mikvah, because Rashi says if it was attached to the ground and then you hollowed it out, that's not considered a utensil. That's considered the ground. It's something that's attached to the ground, and so therefore it's not a utensil. The amris, and if you want to say shinoi Hashem milsahi, if you want to say once you change the name, then it can no longer go back to its original status. And afilu kavol sof chakako, and even if you attached it to the ground and then you hollowed it out, you changed its name. Even though it's attached to the ground, it should be considered a utensil, not a lipaso, and it should also be disqualified. So if we say that changing the name of something makes it a new status, it cannot go back to its original status, then why in the case of the mikvah, if you hollowed it out while it was attached to the ground, is it still going to be considered a kosher mikvah? You've changed its status from a block of wood to a pipe, and it should still disqualify. So the Gemara answers, no, it's not going to. This case is different. It's totally different law. This is not a case. This is a case of she'iva. That what's the reason why how a mikvah gets disqualified? Where we're talking about the case of 3 lugin of water were drawn. 3 lugin of water were drawn, and so therefore we're going to say shani shiva. The case of drawing water is different to midrabbanani. Therefore, the case of drawing water is rabbinic, and so therefore, since the case of drawing water is a rabbinic prohibition, and so therefore, we're going to say, for this reason, is rabbinic. And so therefore the rabbis say, since it's only rabbinic, we're only going to disqualify it if it is, we're not going to disqualify it even though it has a change in the name since it's attached to the ground. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, hold on, let me just stop the text messages from coming in. I have to put it on focus. Okay. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, if it's only rabbinic, even in the first clause of the brisa, where you hollowed it out and then attached to the ground, there also we should have not disqualified it. The Gemara says, no, hasam ika Taurus kuyalav the talish. In that case, it's obviously different because in that case, when it was removed from the ground, it became categorized as a utensil. And so that is why we're going to say it's considered drawn water. But here, here it's not considered to be when it was removed from the ground. It wasn't removed from the ground at all, and so therefore, once it doesn't have this status of a utensil that's removed from the ground as a utensil when it's removed from the ground. Now the Gemara says, Meisvei, the Gemara is going to introduce a question against Rav Yosef. We said in this morning's daf that Rav Yosef is of the position that even though a person gives up hope, Eino Kona, that does not affect the thief's ability to acquire the object, either rabbinic or biblically. Remember, Rabbah said, if the owner of the object that was stolen gave up hope, then Rabbah said that means I don't know if the thief acquires it biblically or rabbinically. But Rav Yosef said even rabbinically he does not acquire it. So if that's the case, we're going to challenge Rav Yosef from the following case. Haganaf we know is a thief. A gazlan is a robber. V'ha'anas. Anas is somebody, Rashi says this is a synonym of a chamsan, meaning to say you force the person to sell it to you by giving him money. Hektish on hektish, utrumas on truma. That if they consecrated something that they stole, it's going to be considered consecrated. And they're offering, if they took something from what they stole and they gave it to the Kohen, they separate as a tithe, it's going to be truma, and a non-Kohen cannot eat it. So we see from here that how have they acquired it? Because the person gave up hope. So we see from here, Rashi says that so that he's acquired it. Umasr saying Meiser, and their tithes are tithes. So we see from here that they stole it. They didn't do anything to change its status. All that happened was the person they stole from gave up hope, and they've acquired it. So it's a question on Rav Yosef. Mar says, no, that case is totally different. Why? Amri Hasam Ikoi Shinoi Hashem. That case, there's actually a change in name because he made it hektish, he made it truma, he made it meiser. The meikara tivla v'hasha truma. At first, it was something completely different. It was trum, it was tevel, it was untithed. Now it's tithed. It changed its status. It was hektish meikara chulin v'hasha hektish. At first, it was not sacred, and now it's sacred. And so he completely changed its name, and that's how the thief was able to acquire it. Amar of Krista, Amar of Yos, son. So now the Gemara asks a fundamental question, which is typical of the Gemara, that after we've gone through a discussion of the details, we give the general principle. How do we know that when a thief acquires something, that when a thief changes something, he thereby acquires it? Remember, we've said, of course, the thief has to make restitution, but he's acquired the object through a change that he's made in it. Well, this is based upon the pasuk that it says in Leviticus, Shenemar v'heishiv esagzelo, he returns that which he has stolen. Ma tamalomer asher gazal. Why does it say v'heishiv esagzelo asher gazal? That means im ke'ein shegazal, if it's still in the same status that it was in when he stole it, then yachzir, then he returns the actual object that he stole. The imlav, but if it's not in the same status that it was in when he stole it, that's damim ba'alma ba'yishume. Then he just has to pay back the money. So the Gemara says, well, we have a problem with this. I asher gazal mi bailo miute gazal aviv she'eno mosif chomesh. We have a different discussion of this. The fact that the verse says he has to return the thing that he stole. We need that to teach us that if his father steals something, she'eno mosif chomesh al gazal aviv. What's this case? This is a case that we're going to get to on 104b, that let's say the father steals something and the father swears falsely Now, typically speaking, if one steals something and swears falsely and then admits it, he pays back the principal plus 1/5, plus he brings the carbon asham. And so in this case, where if the father steals something and he swears falsely, that the son does not have to pay back the 1/5, but he does have to pay the principal from the estate. So that's what we're using this verse, Asher Gazal, that he stole, to exclude a case where his father stole. So how can you say that this pasuk of Asher Gazal is teaching us that you only return the exact object when you didn't make a change to it? When we're saying that it's to teach us that you don't pay the 1/5 on the theft of your father. Mar says, no, Im Kain Nichtov Rachmana Veishiv es Gizelo Asher Gazal. Veishiv es Gizelo. It will return his theft. Asher Gazal. That which was stolen Ramali from Nichtav. Why does it have to say Asher Gazal? Shmamina. We learn from here Tarti. We learn from here both laws, both the law that he returns, that he doesn't pay back the 1/5 of his father, and also the law that he doesn't return the object if he makes a change in it. The Ika Amri, an alternative version of this discussion, is Amar Afkus Amar Yochanan Minayin L'Shinoi She'eno Kona. How do we know that a change in the item does not affect the acquisition? Just the opposite. He says, not that, before we said the version was how do we know a change does affect the acquisition. Now he says, how do we know that the change does not affect the acquisition? So he says, because it's based on the fact that the pasuk says, "Veheshiv esak zela." He returns the stolen object, mikol makom, regardless of whether or not he made a change to it. He returns the stolen object. And Mara says, but how could that be? Vaksiv asher gazal. It says he returned the stolen object that he stole. Mara says, "Whom violate?" That's to teach us al gzelo shalo motiv pomesh ve'emotiv pomesh al gazal. That's to teach us, just like we learned before, that he only pays 1/5 if he himself stole it, but not if his father stole it. So you have two opposite versions. The Gemara seems to not conclude at this point whether or not the change in the object has caused him to acquire it or not. Amar Ula, so now Ula teaches me, she'eno kona. How do we know that if a person gives up hope, he has not acquired it? So this is like Rav Yosef. Remember, Rabbah said that if the person has hope, if the person gave up hope, if the guy who was robbed gave up hope, then the other person acquires it. And Rav Yosef said that the person giving up hope does not allow the thief to acquire it. But how do we know that this is the case? So Ula is agreeing with Rav Yosef. How do we know? As it says, Vehevetim Gazul, that it says that you bring it. This is a verse from Malachi, and Malachi is criticizing those people who bring bad sacrifices to God. And what kind of sacrifice are you bringing? Vehevetim as a gazul. You bring a stolen animal as an offering. An animal that is a lame, or a sick animal. So what does this mean? Gazul dumya de piseach, that a stolen animal is similar to an animal that has a limp. Ma piseach the takanta, just like this animal that is limping, that there's no way that you could bring this offering. Ma piseach the takanta klal, just like this animal that's lame, there's no way you could bring it. Af gazul. So too, if the animal was stolen, there's no way you could bring it. It does not matter with neyesh, it doesn't matter, says the Brisa, whether it was before yesh or after yesh. So that's how Ula is interpreting the Brisa. That even if the person has given up hope or not given up hope, the stolen object does not belong to him, and so therefore he can't bring it as an offering. Rava says, Rava says, I'll give you a different source for the idea that Yeyosh, the giving up hope, does not affect the acquisition by the thief, because Rava says, Mehacha, Karbano, he brings his sacrifice. V'lo agazul, Adam ki akriv Karbano Hashem, a person brings his offering, but not stolen. Now, Amos, so Rava says, When would this be a problem? If it's before the person gave up hope of ever acquiring it, Pshita, of course you can't bring it. Lamalikra. Of course you can't bring somebody, you can't sanctify somebody else's animal. You can't go up to somebody and just sanctify his animal. You wouldn't need a verse for it. So it must be that we're referring to El Lavla Achar Yesh. It must be that we're referring to after the original owner who was stolen from gave up hope. And you still cannot bring it as an offering. We see from here that the fact that he gave up hope does not allow him to make a does not allow him to acquire it and bring it as an offering. The Gemara says, but how could this be? Rava is the one who said that. What's this verse referring to? This verse is not necessarily referring to a case where after Yerush and you still can't bring it. We just said 2 days ago that Rava says that this was referring to the Gazel Karban Chavre, that you stole the sacrificial offering of your friend, where your friend had taken an animal and sanctified it, and you stole it and you still can't bring it. So how come Rava is giving a different answer here? So Gemara says, well, Rava changed his mind about how to interpret that verse. One of them Rava said, and one of them his student Rav Papa said. Then we had said in the Mishnah that the midas tashume arba v'chamisha, that this aspect of penalizing somebody who stole a sheep or an ox and then he slaughtered it and sold it, he has to pay 4 or 5 times the amount. But that only applies to a sheep and an ox. It doesn't apply to any other animal. So the Gemara says, Vamai, why don't we say it applies to any other animal? They live shore me Shabbos. Why don't we say that the law of ox, which is written by Shabbos, and from Shabbos we learn that it's not just an ox, but it's any animal cannot work on Shabbos. So why don't we compare it to here too and say that the law of 4 or 5 times the amount does not just apply to a sheep and an ox, but applies to any animal? Just like by Shabbos, it's a chaya, it's a wild animal, and it's a bird, and it's anything similar. So here also, it's a chaya and oaf, and anything similar to it. So Rava says, no, it's based upon the fact that the pasuk says, shor v'seh shnei pamim. It says in the pasuk about a sheep and an ox that's stolen, it says if a person steals an ox or a seh, and he slaughters it, and it says the word shor and seh twice in that pasuk. I'll read the whole pasuk. Ish shoros. If a man steals an ox or a lamb, and he slaughters it or sells it, Chamisha bakar yishalim tachas ashor, v'arbatzon tachas asher. He should pay 5 cattle for the ox and 4 for the sheep. I think Gemara is going to get very technical here now and say that it doesn't really need to have listed both of these terms twice, an ox twice and a lamb twice. And for the fact that it listed it twice, we see from here that in fact it's telling us that this is exclusive to a shor and a seh. So the Gemara says, shor v'seh shnei pamim, which means shor v'seh in midiach minilo. It applies to an ox and a lamb only, but not to any other animal. So the Gemara says, Amri hai miyater, which one of these shor and seh is extra? Which one of these is not needed? Ilema shor v'seh, the seifa, if you want to say it's the ox and the lamb that appear at the end of the verse, if those who wanted a miyater, the nichtov rachmana, because the Torah could have written ki yignov shor oseh utavacho umacharo chamisha bakar yishalim tachtav v'arbat son tachtav. It could have just written it like that and not written the shor and the seh at the end. The Gemara says no. Ikas of rachmana hachi. Excuse me. If the Torah would have in fact written like that, Hava Amina, I might have said ba'i shlume tisha l'kol echad ve'echad. I might have thought that you pay 9 for a sheep and a lamb. That would have been the implication. But if you're going to challenge that by saying, well, it says tachtav, which means tachtav doesn't it say that the word? It doesn't it say tachtav twice? If you're going to say, doesn't it say that? So you might have said chad tachtav miyater, and you would have said one of them is extra. One of the tachtavs is extra. No, we would need it for another drasha. We need the tachtav for another drasha. The Tanya Yachol Ganav Shor Shavem Mana Yishalim Tachtav. Excuse me. Because we learned in the Brisa, I might have thought if you stole an ox that was worth 100, you could pay Negidin in its place, which Negidin are carcasses. Meaning to say, you might have thought you could pay very measly animals in its place. It says the word extra tachtav. So therefore, it's not extra for a drasha. Elashor said the reisha muter. So the words that are extra are sure and said at the outset of the verse. The nichtov rachmana, because the pasuk could have written ki yigno v'ishu tevacho umecharo chamisha bakar yishayim tachas ashor v'arbatzon tachas aseh. It could have skipped the shore and seh at the beginning. Gemara says no, it couldn't because of rachmana hachi. If it had done that, avamina ad the ganav tray. I might have thought if it had written it like that, I might have said until you actually steal, both a sheep and an ox and slaughters them. So the Gemara says, no, we would never have thought that. Because it says utavacho, which means that if it was you slaughtered it, which means you've only slaughtered one of them. Gemara says no, because if that would be the case, still we would have a problem. I might have thought until you steal both of them, and then after you stole both of them, you sold them. So the Gemara says no, I would never have said that because it says he sells it, which means he only sold one. Gemara says ve'ema. Tray. No, I might have thought if it didn't write at the beginning, I might have thought you would have to steal two. I might have thought you're only liable if you steal both and you slaughter one and sell one. So the Gemara says, So the Gemara says, no, I wouldn't have thought that. It says, we never said it because it means if you sell one, you're liable as long as you sell one. So the Gemara says, yeah, but I still would have had a problem. Why? Because I might have thought until you steal both. You slaughter one and you leave one over, or you sell one. So therefore, we need the shor and set at the beginning. So which shor and says extra? El shor the seifa the said the reisha. So the ox at the end and the lamb at the end. The ox at the end and the lamb at the beginning are the ones that are extra. The nichtov rachmana, because the pasuk could have written ki yignovi shor utabacho umacharo chamisha bakar yishalim tachto v'arba son tachatz aseh, and so therefore that's all the pasuk needed to write. It could have written if a man steals an ox and slaughters it and sells it, he should pay 5 for the cattle and 4 for the flock. Tachatz aseh. So therefore, short to safe if it said the racial lamli. So why in the end is it written an ox at the end and a lamb at the beginning? Shmamina sure in and that teaches us this explicit idea that this law of 4 or 5 times the amount only applies to an ox and a sheep and not to any other animal. Okay, so that's today's daf, and I